So in the course of our World War, we are moving on and we are bound to round up. Please, I urge you to read. That's the reason why we give you these words. Are you getting the sense? History is never accurate. Of course, I try my best to explain. That's my job as a teacher. But at the end of the day, you all purchase as a student. You don't pass which way. Because, like I always say, I think this is the third time I'm saying this. This is like an accuracy demanding subject. Information which you are very accurate. So you have to read. You have to read to an extent that if you woke up and let's say, if you wake up and let's say 4 a.m. in the morning, you should tell me about the Bosnian crisis without any problem. Because that's what we are going to look into. Even if we are writing our test, our media, we are going to look into the cause of the World War in some parts of the course. So you have to read. Right. So today we are going to look, we're looking into the Eastern Front, we looked into the Western Front, but as of today, we are simply going to look into the war at sea. Because the war at sea is the one which led to the entry of America in 1970. Remember, we never mentioned about America from the word war. Even from the time we started with the causes of the war up to the time we are now, we never mentioned about America. But now we want to know why America entered the war. Right. So in 1917, the United States of America entered a so-called isolation and entered the First World War on the side of the Allied powers against the Central powers. So America entered the war on the side of the what? Of the Allied powers. Right. So in December 1916, Woodrow Wilson, the American president, had tried to mediate between the Allied powers and the Central powers, but to no avail. So the World War, like I said, it was a war between the Central powers, right, versus the what? The Allied powers. So Woodrow Wilson, who was the American president by that time, tried to mediate between the Central powers and the Allied powers. But the damage was already done. You know, sometimes in a sport called boxing, that's why boxing, it's a sweet science, or they call it the world's loneliest sport. You get the sense? A boxing, I think we all know boxing. It is also referred to as the world's loneliest sport. Why? Because when you get into that ring, of course you have your corner, you have your coaches, and you know a round is 3 minutes long. After that 3 minutes, say, yeah, that's your corner, you know. So sometimes they don't feel what you are feeling. Or sometimes you feel what they are not feeling. I once watched this boxing match between a boxer called Andrew Golota, right? And Mike Tyson. He was punched here and he had a scratch, sort of a cut here. And he had a concussion to an extent that when he was being interviewed, you could hear some slurs in his speech. He couldn't speak well because of how he was punched there. So his corner was forcing him to what? To fight. Keep on fighting, keep on fighting. And he was saying, no, that was enough. So sometimes when you are in such a situation, you feel like, I can carry on, or you feel like, I don't want to carry on. So the people who are outside won't understand what you're going through. So that was the case. The reason why Woodrow Wilson couldn't stop the war, it is because either of them was like, we are already fighting. Yes. You know, that was the case. So, what really led into this? It was the Germans' U-boat campaign. Are you getting the sense? Germans' U-boat what? Campaign. Or it's also called German submarine warfare. Because Germany knew that to get rid of Britain, I have to deal with her in what? In the seas. That's why she implemented the U-boat campaign, the submarine warfare. The duty plan in Britain. So let us look into that. So the Germans started the U-boat campaign, which was meant to destroy British shipping. So the Germans aimed at starving British by cutting all British supply lines by sinking a merchant ships too. So they are warships, right? I want you to get note of this. They are warships. The warships are used for war, for fighting. Then they are what we call merchant ships, right? Merchant ships are ships which carry goods that are made for business, right? So the plan of Germany initially was to sink the merchant ships so that Britain would not have food, like in Britain. Britain would not have any supplies, So the Germans declared all the waters around the British islands a war zone, and this threatened ships of neutral countries doing regular trading business. So the German U-boat campaign was initiated by Admiral Scheer. Admiral Scheer of Britain was the one who initiated the German submarine warfare. Right, let us explain further. Right, so the raiding of British merchant ships by Germans caused havoc in Britain. Germany wanted to control the seas. In May 1915, the Germans sank without warning a British ship called the Lusitania. Right? So in that year, in 1915, Germany had to sink a British ship called Lusitania. So that Lusitania was a British ship, but it was ferrying Americans too. So in the process of the sinking of the Lusitania, about 1,200 people died. And of those 1,200 people, 118 were Americans. So this angered the American president. I said the name of the American president was what? Yes. And Woodrow Wilson was not happy with what happened. He was so incensed. And he gave Germany a warning. USA thus protested against German barbarism. So Germany temporarily stopped the U-boat attacks. Because Germany was also afraid of what? Of America. So America knows that Germany could share the Then Germany better sorry, America didn't get it. So the major reason for temporarily stopping the U-boat campaign was the retaliation by Germany, was the realization, by Germany that they lacked sufficient U-boats to risk American intervention. So in 1916, Germany resumed the U-boat campaign because she knew that there wasn't any other way to deal with with Britain. I get the same. So when Germany was forced by America or was asked by America to stop the U-boat campaign in 1940, she stopped. But Germany had a plan to deal with Britain. So that's why resumed in 1916. So she ended up attacking both neutral and enemy ships alike. It was a successful blockade on German supply lines, which forced the German High Command to accept Admiral Scheer's demand for a revival of the unrestricted U-boat warfare. Because the Allied powers led by Britain, chakazoforsa kuti Germany isateerera advice ya America yakuti imire. It is because Britain yanga yaenforce a naval blockade on Germany. Germany payakamira payapa kuataka Britain. Britain yakabva chance given. They enforce a blockade. Like yaka blocker kuti Germany sambowane any movement from the sea. Sawa nema supply, sawa nichi. So Germany yakangoti kuti kune bataiti yandirapa, let me resume with my with my submarine warfare. So the Germans also resumed the U-boat warfare after realizing that they now had sufficient U-boats, about 300 of them, to win the war before the United States of America intervened. So enough submarines. So by this time in 1916, they already possessed 300 submarines. So and by 300 submarines, tofanogara tapedzera Britain kudhara nedzimwe allies. America inozara kupinda tahwina hondo kudhara. That was the point of Germany. So in March 1916, Germany sank another British ship. That British ship was called Sussex. So Germany yakatanga kuudza Louis Stanley. Then 22 yakauza a boat called what? Sussex. Right. That was the name of the boat. And what was the point here? Right. The unrestricted submarine warfare created food shortages in Britain, and the U-boat campaign initially proved very successful, with several British ships being destroyed. By April 1917, about 450 ships had been lost and many people died. To reduce the losses in the seas, the British Admiralty introduced the radar and convoy system. You know a radar can track, it's like a tracker, it can see where a ship or a car is moving to, or it's heading to, or its movement. So that's what Britain did. Because the submarine might want to boat training comes around when you are so Wagababa introduced a radar system in which they could check on a pharmacy. You know. So warships were also assisted by newly developed depth charge and hydrophones. So on 6 April, the USA responded to the German submarine warfare by declaring war on what? On Germany and the Allies. Japan also assisted the Allied powers. The Germans had wrongly calculated that America would take time to mobilize the what? The forces. Because plan here, Germany and Japan 300 submarine. The guy to kurwisana Britain. America by Zosaro Sikateta to be take it out of beds of that. And again, there is what they call the Zimmerman telegram. The Zimmerman telegram, it's another thing, or it's another factor that you have to consider. So there are two things which forced America to get into the war. The sinking of the boats with the Americans, number one. Then number two, the Zimmerman what? The Zimmerman telegram. Let me try to explain a bit about the Zimmerman telegram. So the Germans also sent a telegram to Mexico, and the Germans' intention was to ally with Mexico in an attempt to recover from Mexico the states. In an attempt to recover from Mexico the states of Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona, which the United States had conquered in 1848. So America yakabotora mamwe states in Mexico in 1848. So that is another factor which brought USA into the war. So America, Germany yakabva support to what? To Mexico to recover those what? Those territories. So America was not happy. Because Germany would have been to support Mexico. Yaida battle Mexico so that they could recover those what? Those territories. And America was incensed. America was not happy by that. Then she went on to declare war on what? On the Central Powers. So at the beginning of 1918, American industries were manufacturing armaments for both the American forces and the Allied forces. Because they came at a time when the Allied powers were almost ready to what? To surrender. So America the weapons, the loans, the food, and the ammunition they poured into Europe in unlimited quantities. And again, most of the French and British soldiers had lost their morale in the what? In the trenches. America so America it was just that motivating. So the US Navy helped to effect the naval blockade on Germany, and the entrance of USA into the war boosted the morale of the Allied powers, and the Americans arrived on the Western Front in France, and they did not swing the balance of power against Germany. So again, some countries which had already surrendered, for example, Italy was just Italy was defeated right at the Battle of Caporetto right before, yes. So she had to come back into the war because of the entry of America. So everyone who was demoralized was motivated again to fight again, you know. So Italy had been defeated by the Germans and Austria at Caporetto. So the Austro-Hungarian Empire disintegrated in October 1917, and Germany was fighting literally single-handedly, like Germany yanga fight anyika dzese one. Because the so although the Germans fought courageously, they lacked the necessary reserves of men, yet the American forces were still pouring in. Even up to now, America is a superpower. I think they have one of the largest armies in the world. So tanks were also brought into operation, and Germany had no effective reply to them. So it was thus impossible for the Germans to defeat the what? The Americans. So at the end of the war, the year Germany had to surrender on 11 November, in 1918 at 11 a.m. So the Germans surrendered and the World War I came to an end. So as 11 a.m. Then 11 what? November, then 2018 years and 11. That's when the Germans surrendered. Right. So we'd like to look at the contribution of what? Of the entrance of the USA to the defeat of the Germans. The Germans were finally defeated. So I think we've finally completed the course of the war. It's now done. Next lesson after exams, we'll be looking into the Paris Peace Settlement. Right. So, America contributed to the defeat of Germany by number one. The USA joined the war later when others were weak and tired of fighting, and USA had a powerful army, fresh and many soldiers to aid the Allies, and more tanks were made available by USA, and USA supported the Allies with the food, with weapons and ammunition, and the timing was also good. When America entered the war, it was magnificent timing. But you also have to look at other factors that Germany had weak allies. Germany fought on many fronts, and Central Powers were also outnumbered by Allied powers. I think there is a point that I repeated twice, that when the Americans entered into the war, they kept on pouring their military personnel, military material, military equipment. It was non-stop. So Germany could contain the pressure at the end of the day, and it subsequently led to her what? It subsequently led to her defeat. Right. So that's it for this lesson. Some of the stuff you can read on your own, but I also explained some of it when I was teaching about the cause of the World War, what led to the defeat of the Central Powers, right? We can blame them for their weaknesses, right? We can also blame the strengths of the Allied powers, and it's also compounded by the fact that the Americans came through to assist the Allied powers. It ultimately led to the defeat of the Central Powers. So, right.